Hey everyone, today I'm going to share two real and scary stories that happened during road trips. So grab a coffee and dive into these stories. I am from Connecticut. I was in a long-distance relationship with a girl from Georgia and frequently took road trips to visit her. I didn't mind much. I love road trips. I've driven across the entire United States alone. There's something so liberating about traveling the highways of the US by yourself. To save money, I slept in my car. It wasn't so bad. It was basically camping. It makes you feel like you're really roughing it. I'd just recline the seat, keep the key in the ignition just in case, and fall asleep. No, I didn't put anything up to block the windows for privacy. Maybe I should have done that. The trip south is a long 2-day drive. My usual stop was somewhere near the Virginia-North Carolina border. So, for my last trip, that's exactly where I stopped that night. Rest stops are usually less busy and therefore quieter than truck stops. Normally, I would have stopped at a Love's, but I was so tired, I settled for the first rest stop I saw. It was eerily empty that night, with just a few lonely cars under the streetlights. Probably travelers with the same idea as mine. I parked in a spot away from the others, under the shade of a tree and away from the streetlights. I figured I'd have more privacy there instead of being exposed to the light. So I did what I always do, locked the doors, opened the window just a bit for ventilation, kept the key in the ignition, reclined the seat, and went to sleep. I've never been interrupted on these car camping nights. So, I suspected nothing this time. That's when a sharp tapping woke me up. At first I thought I had heard it in a dream. I opened my eyes, a bit confused. Since I was reclined back, I was staring at the ceiling and couldn't see anything. I heard another tap, like a small object hitting a hard surface. It came at an irregular rhythm. Was it raining? Was water dripping on my windshield? I was under a tree. Maybe something fell from the branches. Maybe a squirrel or a bird dropped something. What if a squirrel was climbing my car? Or what if it wasn't an animal? The idea occurred to me that it could very well be a person rummaging outside. What did they want? The keys were in the ignition. I could leave at any moment. Still, I lay there, completely still, pretending to be asleep, pretending I hadn't heard anything, hoping whoever it was would leave me alone. It was better not to find out. I was too scared to find out. It was better to remain ignorant. Yet, the tapping continued. I had to do something. There was no way I could just lie there. I had to look. My heart was pounding. At that moment, it was deafening. Whoever was outside probably could hear it. I decided. I was going to look. I was going to lift my head and see what was making the noise. So, that's what I did. What my eyes found sent a shock through my entire body. Every muscle fiber locked up in pure shock at what I saw. The faint glow of the streetlights was enough for me to make out what I was looking at. There, on the windshield, staring right at me, was a face. Someone I assumed was a woman was lying on the hood of my car with her face pressed against the windshield. Her face was completely still, locked in a permanent smile. I froze in overwhelming terror. The eyes I was looking at seemed to be rolled back, showing only the whites. The nose was turned up, painfully pressed against the glass. The lips were stretched, revealing horribly rotten teeth. Even in the darkness, I could tell her skin was pale and sickly, contrasting with her long, dirty black hair. Whoever that person was, they were clearly not in their right mind. I don't know how long I stayed there, too scared to move. Finally, I gathered myself and threw my hand to the ignition. It turned, making, at that moment, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. For a second, I was afraid I was stuck in a horror movie scenario, the kind where the car won't start as the killer approaches. I backed up as quickly as I could, trying not to give that person time to try anything. In my panic, I remember activating the windshield wipers in a futile attempt to get her off. I thought, am I about to drive off with some crazy person clinging to my hood? Luckily, I didn't have to worry about that because as soon as I reversed, the woman jumped off, landing on all fours. Seeing my chance, I put the car in drive and sped off, just as I saw her reaching for the driver's side door. With my foot on the gas, I shot out of the parking lot. Behind me, I heard her let out a high-pitched scream like that of an animal. I looked in the rearview mirror, and for a moment thought I saw her chasing me, running on all fours, her black hair flailing wildly around her. I couldn't see well as I rounded a bend on the road leading out of the rest stop and merged onto the highway. There, I sped up and drove through the night. I didn't dare stop again until I saw the morning light. 2 summers ago, on the way home after a day trip out of town for my son's birthday party, we went to a water park and decided to have dinner in a very small town. After getting a bit lost due to bad directions from Google Maps, we came across a county fair across the street. It was getting dark and the fair was almost over, but we saw a tractor competition starting and thought it would be a fun way to end the birthday trip. We sat in the bleachers and watched for a while. There were many families there, but also some drunk people. I didn't give it much thought since I was with my 16-year-old son and a good friend, so I felt safe. We decided to leave before the event ended and walked back to the now-closed restaurant, got in my car, and headed home using Google Maps. We took a road I recognized that would lead us back home. I noticed a car behind us as soon as we left the restaurant. It was the only other car on the road, as most of the town's residents were probably at the fair or home. I thought it was strange, but figured they might be tourists using the same shortcut to get to the interstate, just like us. I still felt uneasy, but decided to get off that deserted road and onto the interstate as quickly as possible. Driving on that winding road, it was completely dark outside, and I kept a moderate speed, fearing a deer might jump in front of us. The car stayed right behind me. I slowed down, hoping it would pass, but instead it got even closer, practically tailgating me. I could see there was only one person in the car, and the windows were tinted. Fear started to take over me. I had my son in the back seat. I regretted going to the tractor competition, although I couldn't have predicted this madness. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the interstate. I hoped it was just a local wanting to scare some city tourists, but somehow, I knew it wasn't that simple. As I feared, he followed us onto the interstate. Even on the interstate, he continued to tailgate us. I initially slowed down, hoping he would pass, but had no luck. I sped up significantly, but he kept up and stayed way too close. Unfortunately, the interstate was quiet on our side, so I had no choice but to keep going. My friend was angry and ready to fight if necessary, but I didn't want to meet this guy face to face, especially with my son in the back seat. I kept driving and praying we didn't get a flat tire. At one point, I was so scared that I honked while driving, hoping the noise would scare him off. It worked. He pulled over to the shoulder and I saw the headlights go off. I initially felt relieved, but we found it strange he turned off the lights. We sped up, and about 15 minutes passed without incident. We talked about how scary that situation was and eventually started to feel relieved, putting it behind us. We were about 25 minutes from home, and there were a few vehicles here and there, which made us feel less alone on the road. At one point, when the cars thinned out and we were alone on the road again, something happened that I couldn't believe. Right beside us, a little behind, the headlights turned on. He had followed us the whole time with the lights off, staying carefully behind us and waiting for his chance to scare and surprise us. I almost started crying, but by that point I was very angry. This guy had been following us for an hour. Up ahead I saw the taillights of a truck. I sped up quickly, with the stranger in the car beside me trying to keep up in the fast lane. I think he realized I was trying to reach the truck, so for the first time in this insane chase, he did something really dangerous and swerved his car into my rear panel, trying to knock us off the road. I sped up and avoided the collision by inches. I finally reached the truck and got as close as I dared, leaving little room for the crazy driver to cut us off. We went like this for a while. I believe the truck driver knew something was wrong, because after seeing this crazy driver swerving into me and trying to pass us, he did something I'll always be grateful for. He moved into the fast lane and dangerously cut off the stranger's car, then lightly tapped the brakes. I understood this as a signal to speed up in the slow lane and try to lose the maniac. I sped up to about 90 miles per hour. My hometown was just ahead. I made a sharp left turn onto a side street that led to a main road and stopped at a well-lit and busy gas station. Fortunately, there was a police officer there. My friend got out and explained the whole situation to the officer, who called for other cars to search for the guy. We left the gas station after calling a friend who followed me to a parking lot where I left my car overnight, as I didn't want the maniac to find my house by recognizing the car. I stayed alert for quite a while after that, always noticing that white car model if I saw one on the streets. Luckily, we escaped safely. The most disturbing thing about this story is that the small town where this happened is the hometown of one of the largest mental asylums in the region. That thought kept me up more than one night, and I still check the newspapers for stories of escapees. I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friend Amy and I spent many days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the tranquil, desolate beauty of the desert. One afternoon in April 2010, we were traveling from Red Rock to Albuquerque. Always ready for adventure, we took a secondary road instead of following the more direct highway. Part of our journey took us along NM 55, a remote two-lane road. This part of New Mexico is flat and desolate. You can see for miles, and there's virtually nothing between the towns, which can be many miles apart. We were heading north on NM 55 when we spotted a white pickup truck ahead of us, going in the same direction. Suddenly, the truck stopped across the middle of the road, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from it, and as we got closer, we started to feel uneasy. There was no apparent reason for the truck to be there. We were the only other vehicle on the road. We began to wonder if we should turn back instead of getting closer and having to stop. We were about half a mile away when the truck pulled to the opposite side of the road, but it was still facing the direction we were heading. We tried to relax a bit, thinking maybe he was a farmer or something, checking on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. There was only one person in the truck, a middle-aged man who never took his eyes off us, and he was talking into a CB radio. A few seconds after we passed him, he got back on the road and started following us, but he didn't get too close. He would get to within a few dozen yards and then fall back a bit, only to speed up again and get close to us. We started to get nervous, realizing how alone we were. We hadn't seen any other traffic on that road, and we hadn't told anyone about our great idea to take this detour. Amy was driving and sped up while I frantically checked the map, hoping to find a road with more traffic. There was no other road. We had to stay on this one to get to the next town. Turning back didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. It was moving very, very slowly. This truck was old and battered, while the one following us was new. Amy increased our speed to 75 mph, and we quickly passed the old truck. After the white truck passed it, it made a U-turn and followed us in the opposite direction. As we watched all this, we saw the man in the white truck talking on the CB radio. Without a doubt, these two knew each other and were deliberately following us. It was the first and only time in my life that I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road and genuinely thought the man in the old truck had set up a trap and our vehicle would be disabled somehow. We discussed driving off the road, but this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we were cornered. At this point, the man in the white truck was right on us. We saw him talking on the CB radio, and he stayed on our rear bumper. The man in the old truck was right on him. The three of us were driving down the road. The man in the white truck maneuvered closer, making it clear he was trying to ram us. Amy made a quick decision and sharply turned left, off the main road and into the open desert. The white truck tried to follow, but Amy showed her off-road driving skills, quickly putting distance between us. As dust rose behind us, the white truck slowed down, reluctant to chase us over unknown terrain. The old truck, on the other hand, stayed on the main road, signaling to its accomplices with a flashing light before disappearing over the horizon. We finally found a gas station after a long drive through the desert. Shaking, we reported the incident to the local authorities, who promised to investigate. Here's John Dark again. Did you enjoy the stories? I recommend checking out another video where I talk about real horror stories involving neighbors. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on more stories like these. Until next time.